too inconvenient to talk about. Across Tibet, East Turkestan, colonially known as Xinjiang, Hong Kong, and mainland China, we are witnessing one of the most sophisticated systems of repression in the world. China's recent so-called ethnic unity law merely codifies that practice that Tibetans have long experienced in practice, a systematic effort to assimilate Tibetans and erase the distinct identity and history of an entire population. And Uyghurs continue to face forced labor, family separation, and the most pervasive surveillance. Products made from their forced labor are part of the global supply chains. From the cotton t-shirts we wear, to the Labubu dolls your kids play with, to the solar panels in the EV cars that's powering the clean energy transition. It's a reminder that human rights abuses do not stop at the borders. But what gives me hope is not governments, it is people. People who continue to resist, hold perpetrators to account, to come together to protect and defend human rights. And that is the movement we are building. And that is why we are here tonight. Thank you. Tenzin Nonzin is a Tibetan youth activist focused on human rights advocacy, youth engagement, and preserving Tibetan identity in exile. Who uses the platform to advocate for human rights, motherhood, and cultural reclamation. And with a bit of your personal story, the human rights issues that you're going to talk about are deeply personal. So perhaps we can start with your story.
Thank you so much for that. That was really powerful, and I can relate literally to almost every single word that she said. It's like copy and paste almost for the Uyghur situation, because we also are experiencing the same oppression at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party, and it just went straight to my heart. So thank you so much for sharing that. And we have a similar but quite different story in that I was born in Australia, so I was always raised within the Uyghur community in South Australia specifically. My parents came here in 1988. My mum and my dad, they grew up underneath the oppression of the Cultural Revolution that also impacted East Turkestan, and they continued experiencing oppression at the hands of the Chinese government up until they left in 1988. My dad worked as a journalist for the local newspaper, and in his role as a journalist, he was essentially being forced to write state propaganda. You know, everything's fine, everything's good, you know, everything's great. And one of the reasons why he urgently wanted to leave is because he didn't want to continue doing that. He was like pushing back against the narrative, and it was getting him in trouble, so he left the country essentially. So being in Australia, I grew up in a very comfortable, very happy childhood. I was kind of insulated from the reality of what was happening, you know, in my homeland. Until I was about 16, my dad sat us down at the table, me and my sister, and he kind of explained to us, you know, this is what I grew up with, this is what I witnessed, the horrors that he witnessed as a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old. And that was a bit of a wake-up call for me as a young teen. But I still didn't really kind of be involved in any kind of advocacy work for my community until I had the opportunity to visit Khulja, which is in East Turkestan, the city my parents grew up in early 2014. My grandmother was still alive at the time, and even back then in 2014, the best way to describe it is as though being in an open-air prison. And this is supposedly when things were kind of fine, I guess, at that time, and things got a lot worse. Quite drastically later that year in May 2014, when the CCP introduced their Strike Hard campaign. Many of you may have heard of that. So yeah, after I had that experience of visiting, I realized that I have so much privilege as an Australian citizen, and if I don't speak out, then who will, essentially? And that has led me to being here today. So thank you for the opportunity.
Now, turning to the situation in your home countries, what do you see or is the most urgent, pressing human rights issue affecting your community? Perhaps I'll start with Subi.
There are many. unfortunately. There are many. I mean, some of the most, I guess, prominent ones are the mass internments that are still ongoing. I myself have multiple cousins who are have either been in the what we call concentration camps. The Chinese government calls them re-education camps. I have 2 cousins that have been in the system, and one actually currently is still there. He's been there for 10 years, and he still has another 10 years left to serve. So there are honestly countless numbers of Uyghurs that are in these camps, and there's no way of knowing exactly what the number is because there's so much secrecy around them, so much mislabeling of of what's going on. And my cousin, on paper, he sounds like the model assimilated Uyghur in East Pakistan, because for his entire adult life he worked for the Chinese Communist Party. He actually used to work for the local Ili prefecture. And when I visited in 2014, I mentioned he refused to see me because he knew that if he sees me, because my father is quite active in the diaspora community in speaking out against the human rights violations of the Chinese government, he knew that he would be in trouble because he's in the system, he's part of the system, and he was sent to one of these camps without any kind of court case or nothing like that. There's absolutely no reason as to why he was sent there, other than, of course, being Uyghur, being Muslim. So that's a big one. There's also forced labor, which is another big issue. I think like 20% of the world's cotton is sourced from the East Turkestan region. And some companies, I think it was Weiji, was proudly saying that they have Xinjiang cotton as though it's a good thing. They quickly changed that aesthetically, but who knows if they actually changed the source of their cotton. That's a big one. Another one is also the complete erasure of Uyghur cultural identity and language and religion. Uyghurs are overwhelmingly Muslim. Our language sounds like Turkish. When written, it looks like Arabic. We are our own distinct ethnicity. We are not Chinese Muslims. We have, so at the moment, the Chinese government has kind of allowed people to travel in and out under strict conditions, of course. And some of the people that have traveled, some of the Uyghurs that have traveled in, and when they travel back to Australia, they've spoken to a few people under secrecy to kind of tell them the reality of what's going on, which is the only way that we can get any kind of information. They said that, like all of the young people, they don't speak Uyghur anymore. Imagine being in your own home country and the dominant language being that of the colonizer, of your oppressor. And Uyghur language, there used to be Uyghur language schools. They've been completely eradicated. Now at all the schools and all the public spaces, you have to speak Mandarin. And apparently there were like some TikTok videos or something going around by Uyghur mothers in East Turkestan making fun of their children, saying, oh, they can't even speak Uyghur. So it's like a way of sending the message out to the world without getting themselves in trouble. And another one is also the transnational repression that's happening. So the people that do visit East Turkestan, and I don't blame them because they miss their families, I haven't seen them, haven't spoken to them in many cases. Like my own family, my mother and my father, they haven't been able to speak to their brothers and their sisters that are in East Turkestan for 10 years now. So the people that do go, they kind of go under the condition that they won't speak out. They won't come to talks like this. They won't go to protests. They won't make a fuss so that their families will be safe. And speaking out really is a risk. Yeah.
Thank you. 2 questions, and I'll ask you to answer whichever is more comfortable for you. And of course, awareness is important, but at the end of the day, what do you want the Australian government to do, or what do you want the international community to do for your community? Or the other question, if you want to leave with, is what gives you hope? These are really tough times for your communities. So if you could share what gives you hope, whether in your community or in the world more broadly. So,
I'll take the hope one, which is funny because I don't consider myself a very hopeful person. And we are witnessing some of the worst of humanity these days, and unfortunately it's very easy for us to witness it as well, the internet and things like that. But I feel like when there is such horrible stuff happening in the world, there is an equal and opposite, which is the good in the world, right? And the fact that we're all here today, and we come from different experiences, different walks of life, but we've all had our own fair share of challenges and oppression, and perhaps not everyone else in the room is from the same communities that we are, but you all care, and we have hearts that care, and sincerity will get us far, and solidarity will get us far. So what gives me hope is that no tyranny will last forever. You know, just look at history, the tyrants fall. And whether we witness it in our lifetime or if it's in like 100 years from now, the fact that we're all here today and working on the foundation so that the next generation can continue on their effort, that gives me hope.